speaking with Fraser Hall. He is the owner of Hall Pacific, which is the proponent for a mall, strip mall at the intersection of the Trans-Canada Highway and Highway 23 North here in Revelstoke. And thank you for agreeing to speak with me today.
My pleasure.
Tell me a bit about the project. What's your take on it?
So the project, to some degree, it's a typical highway-oriented development. It's about 65,000 square feet of retail space. As anchors, we have planned a grocery store and a drugstore. So a development like this requires anchors to attract the rest of the tenants. So about a 22,000 square foot grocery store and about a 10,000 square foot drug anchor. And that's what this process is about. The rest of the zoning is already in place and already in the OCP. It's really just the addition of those two uses, as they weren't explicitly contemplated in the current zoning. Arguably, they were contemplated as general retail, but in working with staff, it was decided that it was best to bring this forward and get outright approval for these two uses. So that's really where we are today.
There's a fair amount of concern about the grocery store and the pharmacy. I'm sure you're quite aware of that. Can you say who these tenants might be?
I get this question a lot, and I would love to disclose their names. I simply cannot, due to my relationships with them. So our offers to lease state that I'm not allowed to disclose their names. I want to, because it seems like some cloak and dagger operation. The fact is, it's a typical national discount grocery. It's a typical national drugstore. These aren't big box. They're your typical national brands. I'm just not at liberty, based on my agreements, to disclose until we have signed leases. So right now we're at offer to lease stage. Of course, we can't sign leases until the zoning's in place. Once the zoning's in place, I would say it would follow in several months that leases would get definitively signed, and then I'd be able to release the names of these tenants.
And this project isn't going to be completed before 2017 in any event.
Correct.
Yeah. I understand that, but then I'm a big city boy. A lot of people who are coming here tonight and for whom there is a lot of anxiety are people who've grown up in small towns.
Yes.
They're not used to dealing with major chain stores in any way, shape, or form, and in particular, they're not used to possibly ending up competing with them. Mm-hmm. Is there anything you can say that would allay any of those fears?
Well, I'm of the belief that adding highway retail like this will add commercial traffic to Revelstoke. Now, there's no empirical evidence for what I'm saying, but there's no empirical evidence the other way. It's really a matter of gut feel, I think. When you have 10,000 cars going past your town every day, and 1% of them are stopping, you would think that if we could stop a greater percentage of them, even just outside of town, that inertia may be stopped and they may move into town for further services, whether it's hotels, whether it's they want any dining experience, whether they want to see the ski or want to go for a hike, explore the outdoors or any other amenities they have. We are a highway-oriented development. We are made for people passing by to pull in, get what they need, and then potentially move on or stay. For example, when the roads shut down, people are going to want to look for things to do in these towns. When they stop for a quick fast food bite, they think, we have some extra time here. The roads are looking a little rough. Let's head into town. Also, it gives the people a chance to see the town. Right now, I've driven the road many times, and you don't really see Revelstoke except on the bridge. And you see these two bears as you drive by at 120 kilometers per hour. So the idea that you could stop and look at that quaint little town down there, and we'll have some information, some kiosks, potentially trailheads. We're happy to work with the city, the municipality on improving that connectivity. But I am of the belief that this will improve business to Revelstoke. But there are many here that feel otherwise.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Do you think that, now you're going to be asked a lot of pointed questions tonight by people who are starting to gather here now. Are you prepared to deal with some of the angst that's out there?
Absolutely, and I welcome it. I'd much rather get a chance to speak face to face rather than have citizens of Revelstoke worry and about this great unknown, this evil developer from out of town that may be trying to ruin their town. I would rather just speak face to face. What are your concerns? This is what we're trying to do. is this something that your town wants? I'm very much interested in that type of dialogue. I don't want to. The last thing I want is a black box. Somebody that doesn't like a black box. You know, they may like or dislike elements of what we're doing, but I'd much rather face those issues and speak directly with citizens.
All right. Fraser Hall, thank you very much. I'm speaking with Mike Spall, who is the development manager for Hall Pacific, and he is one of the principals in this strip mall development along the highway here in Revelstoke. Mike, I have one question that I think a lot of people want to know the answer to, and that is, what do you say to people who are afraid of the competition that chain stores, national chain stores, represent to individual small-town businesses?
Sure, it's a good question, David. Again, from the get-go, we've prefaced that this development is targeting the highway traffic, and I think that you're going to be targeting two very different demographics. The national stores will be targeting being at the location it is, the highway traffic. Your local downtown merchants will be attracting the local customers, the customers that they have been loyal to them for years. So I think that it's two different demographics.
You think that's a realistic?
I think that's a realistic answer. Yeah, absolutely.
Everybody, if anybody else would like to sit down, we'll get started with our brief presentation. Promise? So good evening, everyone, and thank you for being here tonight. This evening's public information meeting is for a zoning bylaw amendment application submitted by Hall Pacific Enterprises. The application was received in June of this year and was preceded by a report to council in July. An amendment was made to this application in August, followed by a first public hearing in September. Coming forward to today, the public information meeting is intended to provide the community information about the applications, provide the community an opportunity to ask any questions they have of ourselves as city staff, as well as we have two representatives from the developer here as well. And in preparation for the public hearing. Public hearing is scheduled for next Tuesday at 7 p.m. in this room. And it will be a formal public hearing, which is a more standard format that many of you are used to, where you'll have mayor and council at the front, some staff on the side, as well as similar theater seating with a microphone in the middle for you to go and present your input to council. The application relates to 4 specific properties. However, the developer is proposing to only develop 2 of these properties. So the CD09 zoning district, this is the text amendment applies to, has 4 parcels within it. The developer is proposing to develop 2 of those parcels. The OCP land use designation for the subject properties is highway commercial. The structure of the OCP includes a variety excludes various levels of policy, from high-level policy to wide guiding principles and visions, as well as to specific land use designations. So the designation for the subject properties, these 4 parcels, is highway commercial. This land use is described in the OCP as follows. The highway commercial land use provides for orderly development of automobile-dependent accommodation and services for residents, tourists, and transient motorists along Highway 1 corridor. These areas are intended to provide for convenient, controlled access, parking, without increasing the traffic burden, upon adjacent streets and highways. This use is designated primarily as on the commercial corridors of the city, being the commercial corridors, the intersection with major roadways and the highway, with the intention of making the city more attractive as a tourist destination while providing needed commercial activity. The zoning for the subject properties are CD09. CD09 was developed in 2007 as a response to a development application. This zoning district was developed specifically for these 4 parcels. It's somewhat unique in our zoning bylaw. We have a number of these CD zones. They're called comprehensive development zones. They're developed for a specific area within the community. Sometimes as small a scale as 1 parcel, sometimes as large a scale as the resort lands. So CDs have a certain level of flexibility that's used by communities to deal with unique pieces. So the uses that are permitted within the CD9 at this point in time are a long list. It includes automotive related uses, as well as beer and wine stores, offices, cafes, gas stations, a whole series of accommodation type uses, as well as licensed liquor and food establishments, convenience stores, public transportation depots, highway retail, travel information centers, daycares, snowmobile and recreational vehicle storage, and other uses permitted in the R4 zone. Now, our R4 zone is a high-density multifamily, so it allows for a number of residential uses as well. Our zoning bylaw includes provisions for accessory uses. These are uses that are secondary to a primary use, so uses that can be accessory to that use. And we have a number of those uses listed as well. The application itself is to amend this CD 09 to include some additional uses. The highlight has been, of course, the adding of the 2 uses of grocery and pharmacy. The grocery including a maximum of 2,500 square meters, as well as the pharmacy having a maximum of 1,000 square meters. These are only 2 components of that text amendment. So just to be clear, just to provide some clarity, there are other changes that are being proposed, although they have not received as much focus. The shopping center use is a use that appears in our zoning bylaw, but does not appear in this district, so it's proposed to be added, as well as health center. Now, public assembly and entertainment does appear in the CD09 at this point. However, it's proposed to move it from an accessory use to a permitted use, meaning it can be a freestanding use in one of the commercial retail units. The other proposed changes include adding definitions for grocery, pharmacy, and health center, as well as adding parking regulations. So these uses would have parking regulations set in the zoning bylaw. They would put them at 3 parking stalls per 100 square meters, so about 1,100 square feet. If the subject bylaw is approved, the next step in the process would be a development permit application. If this development permit application were to go forward, this would be the point where the finer tooth comb gets applied to the project. You begin looking at it in a lot more detail. There would be a number of studies involved, including traffic studies, as well as servicing, access, parking, facades, landscaping, pedestrian movements. All those components that come into a development permit would begin their process. Following that review, staff would be reporting to council on the details of the development. That's if the bylaw were to proceed. The further reporting to council on a development permit, however, does not include a component of public input or public hearing. So this would be the finer details, best practice by engineering, by planning, as well as servicing requirements by professional engineers involved with the project. It's that finer detail that will be established at that point. The applicant has indicated that there's 2 proposed anchors. One would be a grocery store, the second being a pharmacy, along with a number of other smaller commercial retail units. And you'll see on the drawings this reference of CRU. With these, it's commercial retail unit. It's just a terminology they use to describe individual stores that may be a number of different things. They may be a restaurant, they could be a store, they could be any sort of host of different uses that are allowed within that. And they're not known at this time, so they're being just listed as a CRU. So the area proposed for development at this point, the developer has indicated that they wish to go forward with a 63,000 square foot retail development, including, as was noted, the 2 anchors as well as the smaller units. And the details of those units would be required to come out as part of the development permit process. As to the process itself, so this evening's meeting, we've got all of you here, which is wonderful to see. The process is going to be, I'm going to do a very brief presentation. I promise not to hold you up for long. And then we've got staff as well as the developer here available at the back to answer any questions you may have any discussions you may wish to have in advance of the public hearing. We have comment sheets available. Those comment sheets are at the back. I encourage you to fill them out and leave them here as you go tonight. They have a habit of once they leave the room, they never come back. So we really want to do hear from the community, so we encourage you to please fill them out here and leave them for us so that we can report back to council. The process will be is we will take all the comment sheets that we received tonight and any stragglers that show up in the morning to council at their next meeting, which is next Tuesday, in a report. Now there may be more of these comment sheets that come in over the next few days up until the public hearing. Those aren't just thrown away. Those become part of the public hearing. They become part of the public input. They just won't be in my report to council. I have a deadline that is looming to get that report to council for its follow process. So that's got to be completed right away. So I would encourage you to please get your comments in writing, get them into us so that we can report those comments to council. Now I've had the question come tonight, does this need to be done in addition to other input that you may have made? Yes and no. You're more than welcome to do as many input pieces as you wish. There's no restriction, there's no limitation. You can wish to do a letter, you can do an email, and you can do a submission at the public hearing. You're welcome to do as much as you wish on it. This can be either your submission or it can be one of your submissions. There's no restriction on it. So if you submit your comment sheet tonight, please don't think that that doesn't mean that a thought comes to you later this week, that you're unwelcome to please bring that forward as well. So just 1 second. The next part is the actual formal public hearing itself. It's going to be on November 24th. It's going to be, again, as I noted at the beginning, it'll be hosted in this room. It'll be a very similar layout, but we'll have council here available to hear directly from the public. Following the public hearing, there'll be consideration of third reading. Now, there has been quite some discussion about what that means. Does that mean the council is going to, directly after the meeting, vote on this project and that will be it? And the answer to that is no. This is the next step. It's to close the public hearing, consider third reading, then this bylaw will go off to the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure. It requires their approval. It comes back to council. At that point, council then has to consider adoption of the bylaw. So this is where the time between when they give third reading and adoption, whereas they'll review all of the information they've received from the community and make their final decision on how the application is to proceed. As I noted, we do have Fraser Hall, who's one of our developers and one of the owners of Hall Pacific, and Mike Spall, who works with him. They've come out for this public information. They're here to answer any questions you may have that you wish to ask them directly. They're both here as well, as we have Chris Selvig, our assistant planner, is here, as well as myself. I'll be back there as well. And we have Mike Thomas, who's our city engineer. So we're here to answer any questions you have, provide any clarification you need about the process, about the input, about the project, and we'll answer as many questions as we can at the back panels directly after this meeting. So thank you very much for coming today, and please hang around and ask as many questions as you wish. Thank you.
Question?
I'll come see you.
At what point does the transfer of the ownership of the land take place? entire process that you described a few minutes back.
Repeat the question.
Sorry, the question was, is when does the transfer of ownership take place? And I can't answer that question. That's a private matter between the landholder and the developer as to when they wish that land transfer to take place or what their agreement is. They may be able to answer that question for you while they're here tonight. Thank you very much, everyone.
Just one clarification, Dean. You're saying that after the public hearing next week, there will not be a vote by council, or there will be?
There will be another vote.
After
Two
the
separate
public
votes.
hearing. Okay.
One is for third reading, but I've heard it spoken tonight that that's the end, and that's not the end. It's the point where it can then be sent to the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure. It has to come back to council for a final reading and adoption before it becomes a true bylaw.
And in your experience, how often does anything, you have a long experience in civil matters, have you ever seen anything rejected after it goes to the ministry?
Yes. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.